Now we're going to talk about local coverage of the debates as well as the local coverage of the elections. But first, study after study proves that most journalists lean to the left. Isn't that some proof that media as well leans to the left? That there is maybe a liberal media bias?
I don't think that that's true at all. I think that that's one of the greatest falsehoods of the past half century, that there is in fact a media bias to the left. I haven't seen these same studies that you've seen that say that all reporters are radical left-wing lunatics. Certainly in my experience as a reporter, being out in the field working with other reporters, I find that generally, yes, most reporters have political beliefs. In fact, I think that reporters that have political beliefs are some of the best reporters, because anybody that doesn't have political beliefs is not taking a stake in the process. They're just a completely neutral observer, and the outcome really has no bearing on them. You want your reporters to care about the stories that they're covering. Part of being a professional reporter is acknowledging that you have those beliefs, and through that acknowledgement then being able to filter it out of the product that you're putting out for people. Now, whether various media outlets slant to the left or the right is something that you can quibble about for hours on end. But the fact remains that 90% of the media in this country are owned by the same 7, 8, or 9 corporations. And these are not corporations that are afraid to exert their political leanings and their political will over the boots on the ground soldier types, reporters in the field, essentially. Whether or not a reporter has a bias, I feel, is becoming more and more irrelevant to question as media consolidation continues in this country. Whether or not a big company is exerting its political will over the overall editorial content, I think, is the bigger question, because certainly they have the final say. They have more of a say over the end product that hits the air.
That is interesting, because I was wondering if you're going to have the same exact answer. I interviewed Lee Rayburn, who was a progressive talk radio host.
And also a former Clear Channel employee.
A former Clear Channel employee. And he literally, I asked him about the liberal media bias, and he had practically the same answer as you, which is basically, you know, that the consolidation is what the issue is, and not necessarily liberal versus right or whatever. It's really corporate media bias.
Mm-hmm. It's something that becomes more and more salient, I think, year in and year out. And there's certainly, like with reporters, there are good companies out there who do not flex that muscle and don't exert their political leanings over their content, and there are companies that do.
All right. Okay, I don't want to cover this too much because I want to go over the actual election coverage, but what do you, BJ, what do you think on this?
I think that that in the past there was a liberal bias, not probably so much amongst local media as so much national media, but I think it's because of the consolidation from a business standpoint of these media outlets. It's basically come to the center. You know, you're always gonna have you know the CNNs of the world, the Fox News of the world, the national media outlets. They're always gonna have their right-wing goombas and their right-wing goombas, and you're gonna roll with that. But I think more so than ever, it's come to the center. I will say this: I mean, the last election, there was an absolute love affair for Obama for some of these media people, and it was obvious. And I think that's what it was. You know, I think that's where it got some of the the conservatives / Republicans upset about.
What do you think, Michael?
I guess I wonder, you talk about the consolidation of these different groups all owning everything, and whether these corporations are expressing their own political views, perhaps to potentially slant. And I wonder if it's political views or it's just that's business. We look at Murdoch with Fox, and there's a clear right slant. And it's ironic that, I believe it was when he bought the News of the World, when he moved from Australia, that he was actually almost blocked because it was believed that he was too liberal to take over that he would have a liberal slant. And I think it's almost, I wonder what his actual political views are, or if it's just that, hey, we're going to throw everything in this direction because it gains us a loyal audience. People, we're going to tell them, present things in a way that they want to hear. And I wonder if that's where potential bias, because there's definitely bias in certain news stations, networks, I should say, to the left, some to the right. And honestly, for myself, I get all my news from like the BBC and The Economist, and the American news just drives me nuts, actually, these days. But I'm just wondering if anyone can comment whether it's actual political leanings or if it's just, that's the business model, is to create this loyal listenership.
Yeah, like it's a brand. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Stacy, you have anything?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important that we have a fourth estate, that we have a rigorous media in our country, and I think that's definitely at risk. The for-profit model of journalism is dying. We're talking about these consolidations, but that can only lead to monopoly and advertising-driven media, and I think that's really the wrong way for our country to go. We need to have a free exchange of information in order to be able to make valid decisions. But I think that what Dusty was talking about was not just about personal choices and personal beliefs of journalists, but the fact that journalists, if they're good journalists, need to be bound by a set of ethics. And those ethics should really transcend any personal biases that those journalists have. So I think that the future of journalism and also the election coverage that we all need to make sound decisions is going to be in the future of independent media, and independent media that's really driven by sound journalistic ethics, asking tough questions, getting the information out to people, and to do it in as free and open a way as possible. I think that's really what the future is.
Yeah. By the way, my question from the beginning, it was devil's advocate. I, of course, I do not think that there's a liberal media bias. I think that's a complete myth and a bunch of crap. And Rich Bond, he was the Republican chair in, I think, the 80s. Okay, he specifically said this is a strategy that Republicans are going to start. They're going to work the refs essentially and say that the media is liberal. And Bill Kristol from Fox News and a gazillion Republican think tanks has publicly said the same thing, that actually the media isn't really that liberal. So I think there are instances out there that show that it's just something that works for Republicans to kind of spout. And not saying that if liberals wouldn't do it if it didn't work for them, but I think it's something that they use as a strategy.
I think liberals do use it as a strategy too. I think you've seen it from both sides, and the problem with it is that as this myth or myth or not of media bias has grown in prevalence, you've seen people on both sides. You've seen Republicans, you've seen Democrats come out when an especially hard-hitting story comes out and calls them on something that they're doing wrong, right or left. Mm-hmm. They're able to turn around and say, oh, it's just the media being biased, and completely duck the question that way.
Right.
And certainly I believe that the media needs to be held to a very high standard in this country, as do our politicians.
Yes.
because somebody has to hold those politicians to a high standard. The problem is with these accusations of bias, the media, through some of its own doing, has lost a lot of the credibility that it has to hold other people accountable.
The problem with, my problem with print media, my problem with cable news is that it's always, okay, this is what this person said, and this is what this person said. You fucking figure it out. You know, seriously, that's generally what I get, and I get so frustrated with it, because then it puts the burden on me to go out and actually go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and figure out for myself what exactly is going on. It puts the burden on me to go and search out and seek out what the truth and what the numbers actually are, and it's like, why didn't you just print this? Why don't you just where's Woodward and Bernstein?
Once upon a time, that was a reporter's job, but the problem with hard-hitting reporting is that it takes 4, 5, 10 times as long as writing something up from a press release. And as you cut more jobs from newsrooms, you're losing those bodies to go out and do that sort of hard-hitting reporting. And it's part of, I believe, and this is a topic that we're going to discuss later, it's part of what's leading to the growing polarization in this country, is people being able to come out and say, okay, well, I have a different set of facts than you do.
Right.
But that is a rant for another time.
Right. In just a little bit, actually. Let's talk about the actual coverage of the debates. Because there's some stuff that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, certainly. This has been strange for me. This has been my first presidential election cycle in, this has been my first election cycle in 6 or 7 years where I haven't actually been a reporter for it. So I've been able to kind of take a different look at it so far. And what I've found in the media coverage of it is I've found it incredibly frustrating. And certainly I understand where this comes from. Covering an election that goes on for 2 damn years is really hard as a reporter, because you have to keep people's attention. The problem with keeping people's attention in America is that it is increasingly difficult. Sometimes as a reporter you feel like you're jingling a set of keys trying to get a little kid's attention, and all they want to do is watch Honey Boo Boo on TV. It's not easy. And so what we've seen, I think, as the overall discourse in America has become Honey Boo Boo-ified, you've seen the news coverage of important issues like the presidential race get dumbed down, as well as the news media tries to outdumb the rest of the media, the Honey Boo Boos out there. And so I think this presidential race, more than any other, the news media has really tried to portray this as a horse race, as a boxing match, as a football game, in the hopes that somebody will buy a damn newspaper and read it. And so it's really, every debate was portrayed, or the first debate, oh my God, did you see Obama? He didn't look like he wanted to be there. Romney won, and there were flash polls, instant polls, asking people who won the debate.
There was CNN, even graphs that go down at real time.
At the end of the day, there's nobody that wins a debate. A debate happens, and then people watch it, and then people either become more informed by that debate, or they don't.
But to be fair, pretty much everyone thought Obama sucked in the first debate.
He didn't do well. So what happened? What happened to that mentality then? That boxing match mentality in the third debate, which a lot of these flash polls found that the president won handily, even very very much outducked and outdodged Romney on terms of foreign policy. Where were the big headlines the next day? President Obama wins debate. You didn't see it, and
it was the third debate. No one cared about foreign policy.
I feel like the overall media coverage of this election cycle has been very shallow and kind of disappointing.
Okay. Interesting. Michael, did you watch the debates?
To be honest, I did not. I think they're a big press conference for either candidate. I think.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't think there's anything really to be. They're not really debates. They're not really debating issues. They're just who can get soundbite in, who can get a zinger, and that to me, it has nothing to do with it. I'd rather see what their actual policy is, like if they actually release something. What's coming out in debates is just they're just dodging and throwing out sound bites. So to be honest, no, I didn't.
No, that's a good answer. BJ, what do you think?
I did watch the third debate. That's basically it. I mean, the best debate of this whole thing was the vice presidential debate, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Agreed.
It was the most entertaining.
Malarkey.
It was the most entertaining, and it was the most useful because the voters, they basically they got the debate, right? They let them debate, and that's what it's all about. They didn't stop the other one from saying something. They actually let them debate. So, yeah, I mean, these debates, it's just talking. It's just the talking points for each candidate to go ahead and give it, and then we're done. So.
That's good. Stacy, did you see any of that? Did you see the debates?
I skipped the debate. I went to yoga class.
And you're probably, your mental health is probably much healthier as a result.
Yeah, that is, Stacy was smarter than, Stacy and Michael were smarter than us three.
I think BJ and Michael made really great points where you could there's certainly entertainment value in these debates, and it's certainly a way to get people's attention onto the presidential race. But look at Mitt Romney, Governor Romney, who repeatedly throughout the course of these debates was asked, okay, so you've got this tax plan where you say you're going to cut taxes for everybody and close loopholes in the tax code, but which loopholes are you going to do? And then he'd move to his next talking point. Not even acknowledge the fact that he was asked the question. You've got Tammy Baldwin and Tommy Thompson, who, in what I thought was a really remarkable move, the second debate.
Yeah, that was unbelievable debate. I love that debate.
The moderators said, we're going to give you a 6-minute window of time completely on your own. You can do whatever you want. We're just going to basically lock you two in a steel cage and watch what happens for 6 minutes. And you'd think you'd think it would have been good. You'd think it would have been this great back and forth and a give and take and a real sort of policy debate, nitty-gritty, grinded out sort of moment. And instead you had two people, particularly Tommy Thompson, but Tammy Baldwin too, standing on the stage awkwardly regurgitating the same talking points that they had just hit on. Not saying anything new, there's no give and take between the two of them, but essentially, okay, I'm going to say this again, now it's your turn, you say this again. They were forced to look like idiots. Which I think was the value of that.
They actually had to think.
Yeah. And they proved that they couldn't do it. At least not on the spot. They hadn't been trained for that. They hadn't been prepared for that by their handlers. They had been given a list of talking points and said, go out and do this, and that was all that they could stick to. That was to me one of the most remarkable moments of this entire election cycle.
I agree. That was my favorite debate out of all of them I've seen. And I liked it because it was, but there's two ways we could go at this, right? The debate moderator, the debate moderators could do what they did for Tammy Baldwin and Tommy Thompson on the second one, which is pretty much saying, okay, it's Thunderdome, 6 minutes, go at it. Or it could have been what Martha Raddatz did, which is, and I'm wondering, and I gotta admit, I'm a little conflicted on this. Martha Raddatz jumped in, right, and during the debate and said, well, Mitt Romney, actually Obama did say this, but then, you know, the YouTube video, you're right, you know, wasn't really that clear for 14 weeks or 14 days throughout the Libya crisis. So, you know, what's the better way?